The House Oversight Committee says the Department of Justice is obstructing its investigation into former President Donald Trump. Committee Chair Carolyn Maloney claims that DOJ is preventing the National Archives from surrendering relevant documents to Congress. The panel wants the records Mr. Trump took without authorization to his Florida residence. CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa joins me now for more. Bob, why does the Oversight Committee want these documents, and why might the Justice Department be blocking Congress from seeing them?
Good to be with you, Nicole. House Democrats are very interested in how former President Trump handled his records. And this stretches not only across the January 6th committee, but over to the House Oversight Committee. It has been widely reported and confirmed that the former president brought about 15 boxes of materials, including allegedly top secret documents in some cases, to his Mar-a-Lago estate in the weeks after he left the White House. The Presidential Records Act says the National Archives should be responsible for handling those records versus the president himself. And that's a real point of tension between House Democrats and the former president in recent months. But now we're seeing it's a possible investigation in its very early stages as a possible target for the Department of Justice.
Former President Trump told the Washington Post in a piece out today in it Mr. Trump pleads ignorance to the 7-hour gap in phone records that you and Bob Woodward reported on, and on phone calls from that day generally. He says, quote, "Why would I care about who called me? If congressmen were calling me, what difference did it make?" What do we know about who the former president did speak to on the day of the insurrection?
We're still trying to piece together the puzzle of former President Trump's January 6th day, in particular, whom he was speaking to on the phone. As we reported at CBS News with the Post, he spoke to people like Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani and Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio. In the morning of January 6th, he spoke to several of them at night after the riot had taken place, the attack on the Capitol, spoke to other aides and friends in the evening. Those calls from the White House residence in the morning in the evening are documented in the White House call logs. What's missing is a careful official record of the calls made in that interim period during the height of the violence on the U.S. Capitol. Our reporting shows that the documents obtained by the House January 6th committee do not contain any kind of new information or detailed information about that 7-hour period. The former president says he's done nothing wrong. He said that in a statement to CBS News when we came out with this reporting. He reiterated that message in this interview with the Washington Post. But despite those statements, as a reporter, it's clear that we still don't know enough about whom he was speaking to. He says it doesn't matter who he was speaking to. That's, of course, his right to say. But as someone who's been reporting on the story for a while, I would love to learn more about whom exactly he was speaking to, for how long, and with what intent.
What else did the former president have to say about January 6th?
The president, in this interview with the Washington Post, talked about how the Secret Service, he says, blocked him from walking along with his supporters to the Capitol on January 6th. The former president also talked about the crowd size at the Ellipse near the White House, where he held that rally before the attack took place. Broadly speaking, what you see in the president's remarks is no apology, no kind of any kind of reservation about what happened on January 6th. He does not approve of the violence, to be sure, and he has condemned it since day one. But we still don't have a lot of clarity about what he was doing during that 7-hour period, beyond being on the phone in a general sense. And we see from the former president this determination to continue to state that the election was stolen, a false claim, and that he's really hands off when it comes to the events of January 6th. And this is a view many of his supporters have embraced, but he was impeached by House Democrats for, in their view, stoking this violence and being a direct cause of it.
Could this or any other public statement about the events of January 6th from the former president impact the January 6th House Select Committee investigation?
He said in the interview that he might be willing to connect with the committee at some point to engage with them, which is somewhat surprising. We'll have to see if that ever takes place. This is a former president who's been fighting on executive privilege grounds against the committee's work for a long time, trying to block records that went all the way to the Supreme Court. which ultimately issued an order for Trump in the National Archives to have to turn over the records to the January 6th committee. This is a president who is part of a group of allies who believe that the best thing to do is to kind of just wait and see what the committee does, to block it at some points with asserting executive privilege, though he did note in the interview that he did not ask his family members, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, and his daughter Ivanka Trump, to assert executive privilege. They did cooperate with the committee in recent days on a voluntary basis. Both gave hours-long interviews to the committee.
Robert Costa, thanks very much.
Thank you.